want me to be cautious, but I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to follow this guy. Now, my illustration here fails a little bit because you're like saying, because it has a bit of a dating component. So let's take the dating component out. So let's take your son. Let's take your nephew. Let's take your granddaughter. And they go to a camp, or they go to a church, or they go to some sort of meeting. And when they come back, there is some sort of call to a radical change. And you're saying to yourself, what in the world is going on here? Is this church, camp, this group, is it some sort of cult? What's going on? Right? Quite frankly, I would be saying, what is going on? Let me tell you something. We as human beings, we tend to have plans. And some of you are big planners, and you have big, giant plans. You got your life planned out. You know what you're going to do. It doesn't work that way, by the way. Almost never works. But you have these plans, what you're going to do. Perhaps it's a vacation that you put together. Perhaps it's a job that you're going to do. Whatever. It's a career that you're going to put together. Some of you, your plans might be, I'm going to take this quarter off for just some me time. Okay. But even though that's pretty small and pathetic, that's still a plan. And what we're going to find today is that there's a man named Jesus. And when Jesus comes along, he's going to say, you know what? I'm going to disturb your plans. I'm going to disturb your plans, whether they're small and measly, whether they're great and profound. I'm going to come along and I'm going to disturb your plans. I am coming to talk to you, and I'm asking you to be a person who radically follows me, and that everything that perhaps you have planned, or your parents have planned, or your grandparents have planned, or you have plans for your children, or whatever the case may be, I'm here to go ahead and disrupt those completely. Because what I'm asking for is I'm asking you to follow me. And all the things which you have valued, all the plans which you have, I'm asking you to put those aside because it's worth it to follow me. If it were not Jesus, ladies and gentlemen, we would have a big problem. Because when we come to the words of Luke chapter 14 at the very end, Luke chapter 14 verse 25 and verse 35, we're going to come to a passage which I call the hate speech of Jesus. How's that for a loaded title for you? But boy, it fits. The hate speech of Jesus. Ready? Buckle up, here she comes. Now, the great crowd, remember, Jesus has been at the dinner, right? He's been at the dinner for at least 2 weeks, okay? We finished that, the dinner etiquette 1, dinner etiquette 2. Now we come here, and Jesus has people following him. The dinner has come to an end, and Jesus is following up on this. Now, the great crowds accompanied him and turned to and he turned and he said to them, ready for this? If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. If you let your son or daughter, your children, or whatever the case, and they went to a summer camp and somebody said words like this, you would say, oh my goodness, that is horrendous. Pull them out of there. How do we detox our child? Right? You would not accept that. We sometimes read this because we've seen this perhaps before and said, okay, I read it and I'm going to forget it really quickly. But Jesus is making an exacting and very powerful call for following him in an extreme manner. Notice what he says here. If anyone comes to me and does not hate. Hey, isn't it part of the Bible that we're supposed to love our family? Don't we read in the 5th commandment, you're supposed to honor your father and mother? Isn't that part of the 10 commandments? So what's Jesus doing talking about hate here? And aren't we supposed to, Deuteronomy chapter 6 doesn't talk about, raising your children up, or in the Proverbs, train up a child in the way which he should go? Isn't it an act of love? And yet Jesus says hate? Does anybody here have a problem with the word hate? Well, I do at first, I got to tell you. You're like, well, it must be a problem with the Greek. No. He continues, if anyone comes to me and does not hate. So I look at the word hate here and I wonder, what is he talking about? Well, I have a little bit of sort of good news for you. We see in the parallel passages, for example, in the book of Matthew. In the book of Matthew, we see that it is softened to touch. So we're going to turn to the book of Matthew, and we're going to see that real quick. So go to Matthew chapter 10. Because in Matthew chapter 10, what we see is something just a touch softer, but it's still pretty radical. And Jesus will say this: whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. When we look at the concept here of hate, it is one where Jesus is not saying you must actively hate mom, you must actively hate dad, but you must be devoted to me. Devoted to me in such a manner that it is of such strength that your devotion to mom and dad would be comparatively considered as hate. That's what we have here. Jesus is saying, I'm more important than anybody else. Jesus is saying, I'm more important, Stacy, than your wife and your children. Now think about that and put names to that. Jesus is saying, I am more important than, and name your spouse, or name your mother, or name your father, or name your children, or name whatever, whoever. Jesus is saying, I'm more important. Now that's almost crazy talk in many respects. And I look at this and I say, okay, this is, okay. Well, that's hard. I see what he's saying. We see a little bit of rationale if we go on a little bit further in the book of Luke. So I want to go back to Luke chapter 21. And what we see here is that Jesus will give a little bit of his rationale here. Because Jesus is going to say, in following of him, it's going to cause problems in your life. Luke chapter 21, verses 16 and 17. In Luke chapter 21, 16 and 17, he talks about how his disciples, he says, you will be delivered up even by parents and brothers, relatives and friends, and some of you will be put to death. You'll be hated by all for my name's sake. Jesus is saying, because of your devotion towards me, because of your desire to follow me, you will have relatives who will turn you in, if you will, to the police. Now we look at this and we say, well, okay, well, yeah, wow, that's the time, of course, of in the first century, and we wouldn't have anything like that today. I'm here to tell you today that some of the things which you say as a representative of the gospel of Jesus Christ is, if it is not already, it will be in the future, will be marked as a hate speech in and of itself. You know, people will say you're causing violence by the things that you're saying, even though you're quoting Jesus. We have examples in the newspaper in Europe where people are quoting scripture and being arrested. And we look at this, and Jesus is saying, you have to believe, you have to trust in me, so much so that you're willing to flaunt the conventions of society, and you can even break the very strong familial boundary or bonds which you have. Follow me. You cannot, he says, follow me unless you love me that way. And on contrast, hate those others by comparison. But I look at this and I ask myself, I said, Jesus, hold on a second. How is it that I can love Jesus in this way? I know how I can love my wife, and I can love my children, and I can love people around. I see them. I see them. They're there. I have ongoing relationships with them all the time. They talk back and forth with me. We can go back and forth. And don't get me wrong, I can pray to God, but God normally doesn't go ahead and talk back to me. How is it that I am to love Jesus with such a strength when the people who are near me, he says, I need you to go ahead and put them below me? Again, if anybody were to come up to you and say, you need to follow me more than your parents, more than your children, you would look at them and say, man, you're a cult leader. You would. But Jesus is saying, listen, I'm more important. Well, if that's not enough, it gets worse. Aren't you glad you came to church to be encouraged this morning? Isn't that nice? Isn't this nice? So, you know, if you're going to a health, wealth, and prosperity church, they're not going to preach on this one here. Okay, this is not. But this is what Jesus is saying. And you have to deal with these very hard, this is a hard passage. How do you deal with this hard passage? Jesus is saying, you got to love me. Well, actually, he doesn't say the word love here. He says you have to hate those in comparison to me. Essentially, you have to love me more than they do, than them. He says, but like I said, it gets worse. He says, hate the father and the mother, the wife, the children, the brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, your own life. You have to you have to go ahead and be willing, he says. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Folks, this means that you have to be willing to go ahead and to give your life to follow Jesus. Now, we look at the cross and we say, okay, whoever bears his own cross, and what we like to think of as we think of a cross, and it's, a T, right? A wooden T. Okay, bear my cross, and we walk around like it is some sort of prop in a play. But the cross, I mean, you put it up on the wall. Okay, we could do nice decorative ones. Okay, this one was made for the church by one of you, and it's a very nice decorative cross. But the reality is that the cross is not a decorative ornament. The cross is an instrument of death. It's an instrument of death. If we put up here, took this down, for example, and put up a guillotine, that perhaps would do a little bit better, would it not? Because it is an instrument that you kill people. But we have turned the cross, and Christianity, they look at the cross and say, well, Jesus died on the cross for my sins, and it was a beautiful act of love. True! And so you say that, so therefore you say, well, we can go ahead and make it something that's almost a pretty type of thing. You get rappers who wear their crosses, and you get Madonna, for crying out loud, wears crosses. Because it's chic or hip or something, I don't know. But the reality is it is an instrument of death. So if you put up here a guillotine, or if you put up here a spike that you impaled people on, I don't know. But that's what he's saying. And you have to take up your cross. That is, you have to go ahead and you have to march to death with me, is what he's saying. He is not saying that you are to take your cross and that you're dying for the sins of other people, because only Jesus gets to do that. Jesus, as the true God-man, he is the one, because he is God, he has an infinite value. And when he dies, his death is one which is sufficient for our sins. The death which we will have, it is a death which is only in following of him, for he is great. Again, we like to think of crosses almost as decoration. Jesus says it's not decoration, it's an instrument of death. And when he says, oh, by the way, you have to hate mom and dad, you have to hate your brothers and sisters, you have to hate your children. In essence, what you need to do, though, is you need to go ahead and love me so much that you will follow me. You have to hate yourself in a sense. If you don't bear my cross, if you don't bear your cross, you cannot be my disciple. So what Jesus is doing at this particular time is he is giving an extreme call towards discipleship. This is not how people usually do it in today's world. People say, okay, oh, you want to be a Christian? That's fantastic. I'm so glad you want to become a Christian. Great. Come and be a Christian, and we have programs for you. Coffee, donuts. Come on in for the community, right? Think of all the pluses that you get with Christianity. By the way, we have some benefits with Christianity. You do have classes. Donuts sometimes, that's true. You have community, that's good, that's great. But what Jesus is saying here, first and foremost, I am calling you to be a person who is willing to give his life for me. Now, Jesus is not a false salesman. Jesus isn't trying to say, okay, sign up without knowing what you're signing up for. He says, I need you to understand that when you decide to follow me, I want you to do it in a logical, thoughtful manner, and saying before you sign up to follow me that you really want to do it and that you will follow through and make it to the end. Okay? You're going to make a true commitment. Again, sometimes, you can have an evangelistic campaign and you can pull upon people's emotions and people say, okay, I have to respond to it. Okay, great. And sometimes that's a great thing. Sometimes that's that last moment where a person finally does say, I surrender all, I come and I will follow Jesus. But sometimes people fall into the area of it's just emotion, and when the emotion's gone, there's no more following. Jesus says this. He says, for which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost? He says, I want you what you want to do. Before you go ahead and say you're going to follow me, I want you to consider that it's going to cost you something. It's going to be difficult to follow me because I'm asking you to risk your life. I'm asking you to go ahead and give up everything that you have. Whatever dreams you have, whatever hopes you have, whatever materialism you have, whatever relationships you have. I'm asking you to risk all of those things and be willing to jettison those things to follow me because I'm worth it. Which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all those who see it will begin to mock him, saying, "This man began to build and was not able to finish." Have you ever gone by something which was not finished? Somebody goes ahead and they start to build stuff. It doesn't go anywhere. Um, oh my goodness. We went on vacation. Was it this year? I'm trying to keep all my years together. I think it was this year. Yes, it was this year. We went to the Dakotas. Yeah, we went to the Black Mountains. We went to Mount Rushmore. We went three national parks. So Wind Caves National Park, completely skippable, by the way. Okay, so that's for free. Okay, save your money. Not one to go to. If you're going to go ahead and skip one, that's the one to skip. But they had a monument there that I did not even know of until about a year ago, and it was the Crazy Horse sculpture that they're putting in the Black Mountains. Now, everybody knows Mount Rushmore, right? And you got your Washington, you got your Lincoln, Jefferson, and Roosevelt, right? You have them, they're up there on the mountain, right? So you got the four heads right there in the Black Mountains, and it's very cool. You drive there, you see it, you sit there for about an hour, and that's about all you need to do. But that's cool. But then they also have the Crazy Horse Memorial, okay? Now, this is interesting to me. The Mount Rushmore, it took them 14 years to put it together. 14 years to sculpt it out using dynamite and chisels and whatnot. They got it done in 14 years. I think that's pretty fast, actually. Crazy Horse, it is unfinished. It's been active for 85 years. They've been working on this thing for 85 years. They need to get a new chisel. 85 years they've been working on this, and you get up there and you're like, oh my goodness, this is almost like, and what in many respects in your mind you're saying, are they ever going to finish it? And some of the local people are saying, are they ever going to finish it? And the answer to that is, I don't know if they will or not. Okay, they're pretty happy because they've developed, a resort and selling T-shirts and souvenirs, and so people still come. So I don't know if they're in that big of a hurry. Okay. But if they didn't have the gift shop, I can guarantee you most people would have looked at it and said, why in the world did they start that? And they didn't finish. I actually did see the model of what it's supposed to be. Well, the only thing that you can see is like this, okay? So this is Crazy Horse's head. Oh, that's true. And there's part of an arm. Yeah, yeah. And you could walk on the arm, and now you can see one finger, okay? It's true. It's really big. So here's Crazy Horse, okay? All right. And you go down below and you look at the model, and the model is, he's got the flowy feathers, and he's pointing on here, and it's got the stallion's head out in front of him. It's very impressive. They're never going to finish it. It is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And the only way it makes any sense is because they can sell T-shirts. So good for them. But for most normal people who start a project, you're going to say, you got to finish it. You got to finish it. And what a crazy person to do this if you're not going to finish it. Jesus says, if you're going to go ahead and follow me and you're not going to make it through the rest of your life, what a foolish thing to do. Why would you go ahead and put the badge of Christian on and say, I'm going to follow Jesus, and then you lived a couple of years and say, you know what, it's just too difficult. I've suffered enough. I'm done. Don't be in the same league as a Judas, if you will. A Judas who follows Jesus for 3 years, only after 3 years and just a little bit less than 3 years, he says, I'm going to give up. Follow me. You got to take up your cross. I know it's hard. Jesus says, I know it's difficult. I know it's a challenge. But follow me. I'm more important than your mom. I'm more important than your dad. I'm more important than all your family. More important than your relationships. Follow me. Christian, in 21st century America, do you have the willingness to go ahead and to sacrifice everything that you have? Are you willing to sacrifice your home? Are you willing to sacrifice your 401k? Are you willing to sacrifice your career in whatever it is? Are you willing to sacrifice relationships with brothers and sisters and mom and dad? I think that's hard. I think it's very hard. I think it's radically hard. Well, he says to the tower, he gives another illustration, although I must say it's virtually the same thing. He says in verse 31, or what king going out to encounter another king in war will sit down and first deliberate, will not first sit down and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes with 20,000. Hey, you're going to go to war? Well, that's all fine and dandy. And kings back in the day, they would go out to war, would they not? They led their armies. You're going to go out to war. And he says, are you going to think about it? You're undermanned, or you think you're going to go ahead and finish? And oftentimes they're like, you know what, I don't think I'm going to, so maybe I'll go ahead and I'll back out. Listen, I'm here to tell you, if following Jesus is something that you think that you're going to try and then quit if it doesn't work for you, you're not a follower of Jesus. There used to be the bumper stickers they used to have out there all the way back in the 70s. I lived back then, believe it or not. And had the bumper stickers out there, and they were these stickers that were, try Jesus. Very, very, very popular back in the day. I think they were yellow with black writing, if I still remember right. Try Jesus, try Jesus, try Jesus. I remember asking my mother as a little boy, and I would ask her, I said, it says try Jesus. I said, what if they decide that they try him and didn't like it? My mom, I remember she said, she says, well, that would be very sad. That's mom's understatement. Yeah. We don't try Jesus. We come to the point where we come to say, I have counted the cost. I have thought about it. I have considered. I am going to go ahead and I will follow him. I will follow him no matter what it costs. I mean, that's why you have all of those songs, you know. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. Jesus, you paid it all to him I owe. I mean, they're all nice hymns, they're all nice songs, they're all nice choruses, but they have meaning behind them. And if not, well, okay, excuse me, verse 31. So therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be mine. No, that doesn't mean, by the way, now some people have taken this so literally, they say, okay, well, I have to go ahead and strip off the clothes on my back and wear a potato sack, and that's all I get. I mean, you get to people like, you know, St. Francis of Assisi, for example, who basically they got rid of virtually everything that they had, and they lived as these poor, mendicant monks, you know, these begging monks. They believed that was the lifestyle which they were supposed to have. So they got rid of it all to go ahead and to follow. I don't know if that's necessarily what's the case, how it's supposed to be, okay? But you must be willing to get rid of it all. You must. And I have to tell you, once again, even as Ken spoke this morning, none of it belongs to you anyway. It's all disposable. It can all be burned. It can all be thrown away. God allows you to use what you have where you're at this particular time, but ultimately it belongs to him. He finishes up with this. So we see the call to this radical call. He tells us to go ahead to count the cost in that call if you're going to accept that call. And then he's going to go ahead and he's going to talk about one more follow-up, if you will, parable. Oh, let me tell you this one last little thing. So when Elise and I, when we were going to be missionaries overseas, right? So when we were going to be missionaries overseas, and we kind of did that. We got rid of everything that we had. We got rid of our car. We got rid of our furniture. We got rid of all kinds of stuff, and we moved overseas. And you might say, well, goody for you. Okay, well, okay. But I like to think of it this way. Yeah, you did that once, but the reality is this. We come back to the States, and guess what? We have a house, and we have a car, too. But God still wants those things. They still belong to him. It's still possible that God says, Stacy, I need you to get rid of those things to follow me, whatever the case may be. I may need you to burn some bridges relationally with some people to follow me. It's not just a one-time thing, it is an ongoing thing. When Elise and I we were raising our support to go to overseas, so we could afford to even get over there, I came across a man. His name was Bill Commons. Bill Commons was a director for ABWE who talked to missionaries, and he told me, he says, I told us actually, he says the number one impediment to young people going to missions, you know what they are? You know who that person is? It's the parents. The number one impediment to people going into the mission field is the parents, because the parents are like, well, hold on, whoa, whoa, whoa. We have bigger plans for you than to go to Tibet. We didn't ask, child, I raised you from little to big, and I didn't want you to go ahead, and I don't want you to go to West Africa, and I don't want you to go to Asia. I want you to go ahead and have a nice, comfortable career here. And the reality is that the children which we have don't belong to us either. And God says that they belong to Him. And it's hard sometimes because, I used to, when I was a young man, I thought, well, parents would get in the way of their kids. That's how selfish of the parent. But see, now I'm the parent. And I look at, and now I look at my children, and my children, it's like they're looking to do things. I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I would do that. That sounds a little bit risque. That sounds a little bit radical. Sometimes the parent wants to bring their child in to do the safe thing, and Jesus isn't calling your children to do the safe thing. He's not. He's calling them to follow Him in whatever it may be. And Jesus doesn't simply call children, He calls older people too. Whether you're in the middle age or whether you're a senior citizen, whatever the case may be, God says, I need you to be willing to give whatever you have to follow me. Well, He finishes up then with this secondary parable, which basically follows up and reinforces what He has already said. But let us look at it. He says, verse 34 and 35, He says, salt is good. I like salt. I'm a big fan of salt, by the way. Salt is good, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no use either for the soil or for the manure pile. It is thrown away. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Okay. Salt is good. Now, salt has the effect of adding flavor to things, of course. It has the effect of preserving things so that food doesn't rot. We know this, okay? And he says, salt is good for a great, but if salt has lost its taste, it's lost its saltiness, how shall its saltiness be restored? And the question always is how does salt lose its saltiness? I mean, salt is sodium chloride. Does it disassociate? Do the sodiums and the chlorine go to different places? What's going on here? And I don't think he's giving a chemistry lesson here. The main reason that salt loses its saltiness is that it becomes polluted. That is, other things get intertwined with it. My brothers and I, we were big believers in April Fools. My parents were not. Myself and my brothers, we were people who had a sense of humor. My parents were not. We have a lot of things, but I'll give you one. But the one that we did with salt was this: is that mom was always doing some sort of diet thing, God bless her. And so what we decided to do is decided to take our salt and we would replace most of the salt with sugar. So we did that. But here's the thing: salt is strong. It's strong. And she would put it on her food, and she'd just eat it. And we were just waiting for her to gag. It didn't happen. It really didn't happen until you had a really large mixture of sugar to the salt ratio. You had to really change that, okay? You really had to do it. But the point is this, is that the salt loses its saltiness when you go ahead and you pollute the salt with something else. And Jesus has talked about this many, many times. Remember, of course, the parable of the sower, and he goes on the road, and you remember, of course, you had the stuff that doesn't grow at all, taken. And then you have the stuff that all of a sudden there's tribulation, and it stops. And then you had the stuff that grew up, and all of a sudden it was being choked by the weeds. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our biggest problem. We live in a society that is affluent. We live in a society that has things, and we get choked up with the cares of this world and our advancement, with our retirements, with our hopes and our dreams, whether they're small or whether they're big, we get enamored with those things and we forget that Jesus has called us to follow him. And it says, if you can't get rid of those things, it says you cannot be my disciple. Jesus doesn't want our salt for Jesus to become corrupted with a bunch of nonsense. He doesn't want the salt to be adulterated with junk. He doesn't want salt, or he doesn't want sand in the salt. He wants rather for us to be a people who are fully dedicated to him and to continually being salty people. And if not, then we are like the tower which is not finished, or we are like the army which has to call itself off, or we are like the salt which is thrown away. It's not even good, for example, to help the soil. It's not even good, if you will, to help out the manure pile to turn into mulch better. It's just not. Jesus Christ is over and over again pictured as a big, giant, warm and fuzzy. And Jesus Christ gives this small message here, and it is his hate speech. He is telling you, I need you to follow me more than anybody else. I am more important than mom. I am more important than dad. I am more important than your children. I am more important than your nephews and nieces. I am more important than your friends. I am more important than your dreams. I am more important than your plans. I am more important than your career. I am more important than anything out there. And he says, here it is. I'm telling you, if you want to be my disciple, here it is. And I want you to sit down and I want you to calculate in your mind, is it worth it to follow Jesus? Or should you say, no, it's too hard. And if it's too hard, live your life. But you're not his disciple. You're not his. But if you look at Jesus, the Jesus of Scripture, and say, that is the promised one. That is the God-man. That is the one who has come. That is the one who will die on the cross for my sins. That is the one who will beat death. That is the one who has ascended on high and who intercedes for me. That is the one who has sent the Holy Spirit to come and to work in my life. This is the one which I must follow. You follow him, and you follow him with everything that's in you. Because Jesus is worth it. I think this is a hard passage. The idea that all those things which we hold so tightly, Jesus says, I need you to be willing to let those go. And when we think about it, when the rubber meets the road, it's really, really hard to let it go. To follow a person which I have never seen face to face. But he still calls us in the 21st century to follow him. Ladies and gentlemen, follow him. Follow him. Understand there's cost. Follow him. Let's stand for prayer. My Lord and my God, I look at a passage like this, and I don't know if I would say that this is my favorite passage I've ever seen. I don't know if I'd say this is super comforting, except for the fact that you would not say this unless it were true, unless you were the one which is so supremely worth following that it must be true. Heavenly Father, I thank you for sending your Son and for him coming. I thank you for him telling us the truth, but the truth is a hard truth. And I pray, my God, that we would examine in our lives our dedication to you, that we'd commit ourselves to you, that would follow you, my God, with all that we're in. We are people who are easily distracted, easily choked by the weeds of this world, easily choked by the things which distract us. Oh, my God, may we focus upon him and follow him, the author and finisher of our race. We give you praise in his name. Amen. God bless you, folks.